This video refers to question 9 on page 71 of the conceptual physics book. It refers to a sliding crate, and it says that the force of friction on this sliding crate is 100 newtons. It asks how much force will be required to maintain a constant velocity. It says if it is maintaining a constant velocity, what will the net force be and what will the acceleration be? So in this case, we have a force of friction of negative 100 newtons. So if the item has constant velocity, that means that the acceleration must be 0. So it's kind of the definition of constant velocity. It means you're not accelerating. So the acceleration must be 0. In that case, the way that we get this acceleration to be 0 is no matter what mass it is, the net force must also be 0. So you can see that if the force of friction is negative 100 newtons, and that's opposing motion, friction always opposes motion, then the force of the push must also be 100 newtons. So then if you put them both together, you have 100 newtons minus 100 newtons as the total force, or the net force, is 0 newtons. So you might be thinking, okay, why is this moving then if it's constant? Well, it doesn't mean you're not pushing. It just means that you're pushing with the same amount of force that the friction has. If you push with more force than there is friction, then the crate will accelerate. And if you push with less force than the friction, then the crate will decelerate or slow down. All it means here is that if the forces are balanced, that you will have no acceleration, which is the definition of a constant velocity. It doesn't mean that the velocity is 0. The velocity could be 0. It just means the velocity is constant. So if you look down here, there's 3 situations that you should consider. If the velocity is constant and the velocity equals 0, then of course you'll have no acceleration. And if the velocity is constant and the velocity does not equal 0, it's moving, the acceleration will still be equal to 0. So as long as the velocity is constant, you're not accelerating, and your net force has to be 0. And there's only one more situation, is that you're accelerating. So if the acceleration is constant, it means that your acceleration doesn't equal 0. That means your velocity must be changing, and then your net force also must not be equal to 0. So you either have a constant velocity or you're accelerating. If you have a constant velocity, you have a net force of 0 and your acceleration is 0. If you're accelerating, then you have a net force that's not 0, and your acceleration will be either speeding up or slowing down. This brings us back to Newton's first law. Newton said that an object in motion stays in motion, an object at rest stays at rest, unless acted upon by a net force. But that's kind of how we usually say it. A more succinct way to say it would be a restatement like this. An object maintains constant velocity unless acted upon by a net force.